Hi, this is Levi. Before we get into this episode, I wanted to take a quick minute to introduce a few of the other podcasts in the WCF Podcast Network. Tom and Naomi are exploring how we interact in our ecclesial relationships in From the Platform. It's a very in-depth series that is incredibly helpful for understanding and developing compassion and better listening practices. That's From the Platform. Sam Taylor from Cleveland, Ohio, produces weekly devotionals in Pause to Consider. Think Mr. Rogers meets Fireside Chat. I love Sam's humble style and think every episode is fantastic. You can find both of those wherever you get your podcasts or on our website at wcfoundation.org. Now, here's the show.
Welcome back to Little Faith. And tonight I'm here with Jonny Pappas, who is in Australia. And in fact, it's not tonight for you, Jonny, is it? It's your morning.
Correct.
So good morning, Jonny.
Good morning.
How are you doing?
I'm doing just dandy, thank you. Sitting in a lovely morning cloudy light. It's supposed to be spring, but it's very moody here.
So tell us a bit about yourself, Jonny.
All right. My name's Jonny Pappas. You might have seen me on YouTube or Instagram. I'm kind of a big deal to like 7 or 8 people. And I'm from Adelaide, South Australia. I was born here 30 years ago this year. I'm married to Carly Pappas, previously Carly Bonner. She's from Wollongong, and she's been good enough to move to Adelaide, which is a bit of a no-brainer if you know how good Adelaide is. And everyone from Adelaide says the same thing about Adelaide. I've got 3 siblings. I'm the oldest of the 3 siblings. 2 brothers and a sister, 2 parents, pretty normal. They also all live in Adelaide.
And what are your passions, Jonny?
My passions, first and foremost, my passion that got me here is, and chatting to you, Helen, is cooking. I love cooking. I love making things from scratch. I particularly enjoy dough and Italian sort of cuisines. That's where I seem to have really found a repeated love for making Italian food. I love photography. I love videography. And when I say I love those things, I mean I'm just an earnest learner of lots of things. I love learning things. I really, really love learning new things. And I love applying what I've learned to getting new skills or getting a new mindset, or in particular, meeting people and having a great chat.
Do you cook for a living?
No. So over the last decade, I've been a wall and floor tiler. That's my apprenticeship's sort of professional status. I then did registered nursing, or I've got one topic left, so I never finished that at uni. I just quit. And since then, I went on to accept a project manager position in construction. I've worked as a project manager in construction for the last 3 or 4 years. And now I am, as a result of turning 30, having a bit of a rethink of where I would like to be, and it's not in construction. It's working with people in an industry that everyone's passionate about what they do. And I'm very fortunate enough to be the marketing and community manager with the Goldilocks suit, which is like a wearable piece of technology for babies, which will be particularly useful to new parents, and it tracks sleep, feeding, temperature, breathing, all in like a little wearable device. And that's a startup company. So I've just been onboarded in the last month or so there, and that's what I'm doing.
How did you get into cooking?
My first memory of cooking and loving cooking is high school. So from the first year of high school at Heritage College anyway, we got, after the mid-year exams, we got 1 week of electives. So elective activities we could choose from a bunch of activities. And every year I picked to do cooking for the whole week. I don't really know why. I think I just did it once and absolutely loved it. I loved making something and then eating it and enjoying it. Mm-hmm. And then maybe later in high school, there was a sort of expectation that I try and cook a bit more for the family, just as a help out kind of situation. And that's when I discovered Jamie Oliver. He had some little videos, I think on the iTunes app. They were like video podcasts. It was weird. But there was about 7 or 8 Jamie Oliver 5 or 6 minute videos. And I made all of them. And they all met with more please, rounds of success. just from the siblings and parents. So I love doing that. I love making food and I love making it for other people, but I still just kind of mucked around with it. Didn't really take it seriously until after I was married, to be honest. And the necessity of having to cook for yourself made me choose to do it on a more consistent basis. And then I realized that I actually love doing it. And then quite often Carly would wait till about 10 o'clock at night to receive some over-the-top weeknight meal made from scratch in every single possible way. And a couple of close disasters. Nothing real disastrous, but yeah. And it sort of built from there. And I was like, I love this. I want other people to experience this. And yeah, that led me to share it on Instagram and whatnot. I have a pretty addictive relationship with YouTube. I watched a lot of cooking shows and people making stuff on there. I thought, I could do that. That looks fun. And other people should know how easy it is to make really good food from scratch. If I can do it, anyone can do it. Kind of one of those cliche feelings. And yeah, I started a YouTube channel in January this year, and it's been sporadic content on there at best, but not planning on stopping, just putting it out whenever I can. And yeah, that's my food career.
It sounds great, and I think like cooking has just been huge this year. Like most people have been at home and have had a bit more time on their hands, and obviously haven't been eating out as much, and like people have been experimenting and cooking all sorts. And yeah, like I think that's been one of like the positive things I found over the last 6 months is cooking and experimenting more, and really like tidying my spice rack and like my pantry, and at times like being paranoid that I wasn't going to have enough food in the house, and so like really stocking up and just like making sure that I had like enough of everything, and that I could be spontaneous and wouldn't even have to like meal plan, that like if I got something in the fridge and something out the freezer, there'd be enough like in the pantry just to like pull together like a really good meal.
Yeah.
And I think some people don't always have a positive relationship with food, and some people it's that whole kind of live to eat or eat to live philosophy. Some people just have the same thing every day. They're not motivated by food. They're like, they only eat when they're hungry. It's God-given, isn't it? Food is God-given, and it's such an important part of our lives and our day. And I think it's not just for survival. You know, food brings so much connection in our lives as well. If we just enjoy cooking and enjoy eating, which is generally better with other people than by yourself.
Totally. Yeah, it's definitely a conscious choice to really take that time to put something together that you really think you'll love, and that someone else will enjoy.
And I think it's really nice when you can kind of like just have the ingredients in your head and just like create and not have to even look at the recipe, and it just becomes like really instinctive and natural to cook, and just to really enjoy the physicality of cooking as well, like because God's given that to us as well, like in our senses. You know, it's a very sensory thing, like it's moving and it's tasting and smelling, and like
there's textures and flavors and hot, cold, and yeah, using your hands and putting fresh ingredients particularly together is just amazing. I personally love it. There's so much color. And you can you really feel like you're creating something, and you get a really big buzz at the end of making a meal, the same way that you would out of making anything. I think we're all creators, and we all love creating things. Just it varies what we like creating, but food is definitely something where I feel very passionate in creating.
And you said you kind of first discovered your love of cooking like in your late teens. And where do you think you were in your spiritual journey at that point as well? Like, do you think food connects with your spiritual journey?
That would be great to say yes, but I don't think so. No, I think that I was very knowledge driven in my spiritual journey. That's where I was. I wasn't really connecting my everyday life with my spiritual life. It was very much a concept. I think that's been a big change since then. Is really deconstructing my spiritual life from a goal or an ideal situation or an ideal, I'm not sure, really don't really know what I was thinking in particular back then. I just wanted to achieve things that I thought needed to be achieved based on my knowledge. I hope some wisdom has crept in, and I've been able to now in the last few years start connecting what I love doing, like cooking, to my spiritual life, to something that will be a part of something God cares about. You can sort of serve in a lot more ways, and you can serve with what you're passionate about. And that's been a game changer for me.
Yeah, and God can develop those passions. Like, he has given us gifts, and sometimes we haven't even discovered them. We definitely need to be open to understanding our gifts more, because we all have these different gifts and talents that we can glorify God with, and they are really varied, and that's what makes us all so beautiful for him.
I agree, and I love that sort of what you're saying there about learning and developing these skills and these characteristics for God, and that's sort of an extension of how he's designed us. That's an intentional process that he's given us. And I think that's what I love about cooking, and what has really unlocked sort of an ethos, like an approach to life and to problems, to God, to my relationship with God, to my relationship with my own faith, almost in a way, has been this sense and this confidence that anything really is possible. If you apply yourself, you can learn something that will benefit other people. It takes away the pressure of being perfect, or the need to be perfect, to create something that other people will enjoy. Mm-hmm. Other people can enjoy a badly presented meal made with love just as much as they can a fine dining restaurant. Mm-hmm. And I think it's that sense that I want to share so much, and that applies to my faith and to my belief about how God creates learners and creators. Mm-hmm. He doesn't create people with a single point in mind for their start and their end. Mm-hmm. He's created us with imagination and endless possibility. And if we choose to do it in cooking, then that's a great way to connect with other people and to create something that other people love.
Yeah, totally. Like the love is in the act, isn't it? And in the intention. It's not, the love isn't the actual piece of meat or the vegetables that's eaten. It's like something, it's in the whole process, really. I remember once I had a philosophy teacher who said, when someone gives you a bunch of flowers, the love isn't in the flowers. There's nothing innately loving in just a bunch of flowers. It's the act of giving the bunch of flowers.
Yeah.
That's where the love is. And I think there's parallels there with the cooking and the sharing.
Yeah. God is like our friends in the sense that he's created us, he loves us already. He just wants our time and our choice. Mm-hmm. He doesn't want our perfect results because, I don't know, we're so imperfect. But that's what's amazing about God, I think. But also that's really inspiring. You can take it as like, I'll never be perfect enough. And I think people can apply that to cooking, for example. I could never do that. The amount of times people have said that in my very small following on social media, I was like, I could never do that. And I was like, no, what am I doing wrong? My whole purpose is to show you that you can do that. Well, hopefully that you can do it. And I think that's God's purpose as well.
And have confidence.
Yeah.
Confidence in cooking, I think, is the key to that.
It's
to the
not
joy.
about creating something that looks as good as Gordon Ramsay's, or eventually becoming some Michelin star chef with, a skill or a passion in it, or to use just to carry on with the cooking. You apply this to anything. It's to bring you hopefully joy. Yeah. And you can actually have a lot of joy without being a Michelin star chef, and you can actually achieve more than you think. But yeah, having the confidence, having that self-belief, it helps when you've got other people that believe in you as well. That really helps. It's a massive hindrance if you don't have self-confidence, or you don't have other people that have instilled in you or support you. And I think that's why Carly's really good. I'm really thankful for Carly, because I think without her confidence in me, I would have either been too lazy or just not thought I should really push myself to be this or that, or, make this. Mm-hmm. But knowing that she's going to enjoy it and be grateful for it is the most inspiring thing.
Yeah, it requires taking risks and trying again. If you fail, throwing it in the bin sometimes and going, right, I'm going to start again. Especially I find it really interesting that you have discovered that you really like dough. So, making bread and pasta. And I mean, we can certainly talk about bread, and like bread is so important in the Bible.
Yeah.
But, you know, bread is tricky. It's got such simple ingredients, not many. It's work. It takes a long time to make a good loaf of bread. And, you know, there's a lot of love, but also hard work, or the kneading, like...
And there's guaranteed failure. Guaranteed. Maybe that's another point that's really worth emphasizing, and something that everyone's a bit scared of, and including me. Like, the fear of failure has got to be a roadblock to a lot of people cooking, I think, because it's a roadblock for me. Trying something like sourdough bread, for example. And I am not in the sourdough bread expertise zone at all. I've mucked around with it and I want to play with it more. But like you say, it takes a lot of time, and it takes a lot from experience from, like, I've tried maybe 5 or 6 proper cracks at this, and they've all been failures. It takes a lot of failures. And having the expectation that you're going to succeed quickly and easily is misguided. And probably not helpful, or the point that you can even like learn a lot of things and then just succeed. I think cooking is very much like life, just to apply the ultimate metaphor.
And our faith.
Exactly.
Our faith
Our life is our faith.
It's not instant. It's not instant results.
0 instant results, and you're constantly improving. I think from every, and I haven't talked to a lot of famous people or epic chefs or anything like that at all. But I've watched a lot of their content. I've talked to, a bunch of people that are much, much more proficient and have been doing this for a lot longer than I have. And not one of them has said they've mastered this or that in their field. Like, they have mastered techniques, but they change them. They change the way they do things. They tweak it. They still love learning how other people do things. And they all have a really healthy relationship with failure. Like a sort of a robust approach to not succeeding, then you try again, because you don't define yourself with a failure. You define yourself with the attempt. That's how I sort of see God looking at us. He's not defining us by our failure or our success. He's defining us by our attempts, which is like that proverb, a righteous man is someone who falls 7 times and keeps getting up. How many times do I forgive my brother? How many times do I show love? How many times can I get away with not showing this or that? And they're sort of irrelevant in this really amazing way, because it's not getting back to that original sort of result-oriented perfection. It's not result-oriented, it's attempt-oriented.
Yeah, it's all in that process. The shaping, the moulding, the learning. Yeah. And before we started recording, you were talking about intentionality. Like, you were saying you just turned 30 and you feel different about it. You feel different about life somehow. Like, it's a time to be more intentional and more thoughtful.
Absolutely. Yeah, that is in a very surreal way. Like, it feels like, I don't know, you never feel any different after any particular birthday, but I did feel like I was thinking differently. I did feel differently after I turned 30. I felt like I needed to be more intentional, because time has become more precious, I think, is really the underlying thing. It's this sense of being more intentional with my time, with my life, with my relationships, with my job, with anything, because we've only got a limited time. Every moment counts. Now, I think in one, like I love the Little Faith podcast, and one episode that I loved, the speaker mentioned the profoundness of this life, and giving it proper weight, because I think he compared living for a kingdom in the future to living for the promise of 90 virgins, which was quite an extreme, and he sort of compared that to like a terrorist group, and not in the sense that there's terrorists, running around as part of regular future-hoping, kingdom-based religious groups, but there's this sense that nothing we do matters now because it's all for something later. And this sense of time and being intentional with it is really critical to me for this reason that he said. So he uses the example of Moses, and Moses says to the children of Israel, I set before you life and death, choose life. And then he said that we should be choosing life now because right now we're in the presence of God. What could be more profound than being alive? And yeah, that really, really sunk home. And like there's a whole bunch of factors, but that line and that podcast, I would say, changed my career direction like that. Or really pushed the snowball off the top of the hill. I went from a relatively new position in construction. Again, I just moved back to South Australia. I got a new position. And just before I turned 30 in this new position. I'm not enjoying it. And this thought of being in the presence of God and valuing our time now as profound really pushed me in my head to change what I was doing, to change my trajectory and to focus more on what I was able to do and give outside of a work context rather than focusing on my career, focusing on my life goals, my relationships, my faith, and how they all intertwined, rather than having a segmented life, rather than having lots of different elements on a plate. You have a meal. And to look at life as a combination, to look at life as, I think like bread and wine is really helpful. I love the bread and wine example. I love the examples of food in the Bible because they explain this concept of time and profoundness, I think, and this importance of having everything together, like everything amalgamated, everything crushed together to make something more beautiful, more flavoursome. So you've got bread and wine, and there are lots of individual grapes, and there are lots of different plants and from lots of different places, and that's how you can sort of feel. I think that's how I felt about life. There's lots of different areas, and eventually they're all going to combine, but it's like I'm not really going to think about them together. I'm not thinking about the flavour of my life, to put it on like a wine perspective maybe. I'm not thinking about the balance. I'm not thinking about the nurture of anything. I'm just thinking about one result, for example, my career, to apply like that. I'm not thinking about how that looks to God and what all these little things are going to add up to before God and before my family, like my friends, my relationships, my kids, if we're blessed to have them, my time with my wife. And I think that's that need to feel more intentional with my next decade than the last was very, very overpowering.
I like that. And like all of these things you speak of are offerings to God, like about how they're all factors that kind of bring your whole self together to be present with Him in your life.
Yeah,
I feel like that's what you're saying.
I really hope so. It feels sometimes like selfishness drives these choices, and it can. But I think choosing to follow something you're passionate about, if you have the opportunity, will actually give you more joy in life and more ability to give, rather than the need to receive love. For example, this could be a bit abstract and maybe not even correct. But it does feel to me that by choosing something that, immediate ramification is less money, I've got to start in a more junior, less confident, less experienced position, to use the work one. And it's the same when you start anything new. It's the scary part of starting to make pasta for the first time. Like, you go back to being a beginner at something, and it's very scary, and you can feel selfish because it's going to take so much time. Potentially, or it's going to be less quality. So I'm just learning this for me. But the end result, I hope and I believe, will be a happier, more fulfilling, more outward focused life. Especially from an anxiety, a stress, or a sense of helplessness, like a lack of control. We have a choice, most of us, and I'm applying that in my very limited experience range. We always have a choice to think about what we can do to change where we are. Because that joy, that happiness, that freedom in your head can really leverage a lot more positivity in your life.
Oh, totally. And it's joy we can share with others, which is so important. It's such a, such an important aspect of showing God's love to other people, and that if they can see that joy and motivation, and like they'll want to connect with us, they'll want to know more about it.
But if you start with a lot of cheap ingredients and no time, you're going to end up with something that is not enjoyable and stressful, I think. But if you start with something very simple and good quality and focus on getting the simple, small, good quality down, the goal isn't to be everything to everyone. It's to be the best you can for the people closest to you. I think the people that you have the most impact with, it's like your sphere of influence.
And some of the best dishes are just, like, say we were talking about bread, are just with the simplest of ingredients. And we do need to simplify our lives and ourselves so that God can work with us. Like, we can overcomplicate so much in our lives and in the way that we look at our lives and the way we look at our faith. But God simply wants a relationship with us, and he wants us whole and ready and open, like, to work with us. Like, we are his ingredient, only maybe a tiny ingredient, but like many all these, aspects all add together. I too feel like I can fill my life and become too busy and overwhelmed. I'm a real people person, but I loved what you were saying about like quality over quantity. And we know that Jesus too, like, had those times where he took himself off and he was by himself. But even with his disciples, he just focused on the 12 and he used them to help him. It wasn't like it was always him. It was always like with lots and lots of people. He focused on the relationship with his 12 disciples and built and developed really rich, trusting relationships with them so that they trusted him and he was supported and comforted by them. I think we too easily can think of 20, 30, 100, more than 200 people, like all these people I've got to help and do. And we're not really giving enough space for God in that to work in it, because we're not... We're not being simple enough.
No,
really.
we're overcomplicating it.
He wants a simple faith.
Yeah.
That's why he says we must be like children.
I love the children analogy. Constantly come back to that in my head as well. How am I not a child? When I overcomplicate things, I'm not being childlike. Yeah, I love that. There's a proverb that springs to mind, and that on the simplicity theme, and that is that a dinner of herbs made with love is better than a feast made in hatred or anger. Or I'm not sure exactly what the quote is, but I think it's very powerful. You're better off having a simple seasoning made in a genuine spirit than you are in having a complicated, overwhelming thing made in stress, anger, hatred, however you want to look at that. You're better off with something small and simple, and you'll enjoy it more.
And when you say herbs, it also makes me think of the first Passover, like the bitter herbs and the lamb and the unleavened bread. And that also was a really simple meal. It had to be made in haste and then eaten in haste so that they were ready, because actually there was a bigger task at hand beyond that meal that they were being asked to do. And then, of course, that was the first Passover, but then that brings us to the Last Supper, which I think was one of the food moments that you wanted to talk about.
Yeah, not in like an expositional way, but I love how much food pops up in the life of Jesus and how much he uses that as a gathering point and a consolidation point for the end of his ministry and the most important moment, the biggest, most painful, most exhausting, stressful, overwhelming moment, most lonely moment for Jesus. He sees it coming up, and he wants to have his friends, his closest friends, with him sharing a meal, and that is quite emotional.
Yeah,
it's very powerful for me.
Yeah, being in the upper room would have been a real kind of escape for him as well, like that moment just to stop, because at this point things are kind of moving quite rapidly,
so
leading up to what's going to happen to him. he's had the triumphal entry, all those people, and there just must have been this immense pressure of because he knew what was going to happen. We, of course, don't know what's going to happen in our lives. And that is an amazing blessing. Sometimes we want to find out the next thing, but actually the burden of all that knowledge, this must have been so hard. And being in that upper room with his friends, must have been such a comfort to him, and that feeling of escape. The four walls, the table, them sitting all around, that togetherness, like a moment of
solace.
Yeah, comfort, peace, and a solid stillness there.
Yeah.
At the same time, I also imagine it being quite noisy. That room was probably not very big, and the food and the clatter of the dishes and the cups and the conversation, the side conversations, as well as those conversations where it's Jesus talking to them as well. A very significant moment.
Yeah, and even the format itself would have been informal and quite leading towards noisiness. You've got everyone, you sort of see in your head, you sort of picture the upper room as it's been portrayed in sort of more famous artist recreations maybe, and it's like a long table, and it's very sort of banquety and formal and sort of oriented that way, just because it's so impactful when you see it like that. But it's most likely a room where everyone's leaning in over something on little couches. I think that was the custom. And everyone's feet sort of point out, and you can wash people's feet, and there's sort of that imagery going on. Everyone's feet are away from the table. Everyone's crowding around. It's probably a lowish table if they're on couches, or a lot of hand movements with different bits and bobs, cups and saucers and plates, whatnot. And it's interesting that Jesus, he has this moment of solace, this consolidation, this connection, this like deep breath kind of moment with the people he loves. And the food is the connection there. And then you think of what happens next. It's interesting, the staging of Jesus at the end, a food again pops up. Food again is sort of the reference point for something to look forward to. He says he has the honey and fish, as that's the simple meal that he shares with them. He doesn't have the wine or doesn't drink with them after he's resurrected. So he shares a meal just quickly in a small way, and references the time when he's going to have this cup anew with them in the kingdom. And then you get sort of, we get to the Revelation end where you get the marriage supper of the Lamb, and I think it's that marriage supper of the Lamb, this feast of everyone that's been given immortality, everyone that's ready to start creating a new and better world. Jesus returned. Everyone's in Jerusalem. There's a feast, and that became a fixed part of my kingdom vision, part of my vision board. It's like an emotional thing that I really wanted to be a part of. And it's amazing to think that Jesus used food all the way through his parables. He uses it through his interactions with people, but he uses it as a facilitator. Yeah, it's a connection facilitator, and it is something that you enjoy doing with other people. And it's both sides for the disciples, for us. He's offering that same experience to us, that intimacy, but also that sort of overwhelming joy and sharing. And I really enjoy big feasts with people and stuff, but that's going to be next level. And that's probably my first real solid lasting connection.
Yeah, I'm fascinated by, you can be sitting next to someone, in an ecclesial hall when you're just on chairs, and it almost feels like there's all this space around you, and sometimes that space is a bit uncomfortable. But then you put a table there, and then you put chairs around it, and you have people there, and suddenly that space is filled, and it breaks down the barriers, it makes it less awkward, and then you bring food in, and then you bring drinks in, and then you have a meal, and then it's this moment. And it's not this I'm just sitting on my chair awkwardly chatting to the person next to me. That is fellowship, and that there's this amazing, I think, unifying power there. with those elements that have been all brought together, they are the ingredients. The ingredients are all those many things: the people, the table, the chairs, and then the bread and wine. And then, of course, that is Jesus there, right in front of us, like his sacrifice, his resurrection, his life, his sharing. And really, like that Last Supper moment, there's that moment, like just, the stillness. Well, it's a really beautiful picture, I think, of his relationship with his disciples and his relationship with us.
It is, and it's like it is a moment, and it creates like a level, like sort of gets everyone to the same point. It balances everyone around the one experience. Jesus balances everyone else, all of us, out. We come in with so many problems and thoughts and attitudes and life statuses and whatever. And as soon as there's food and everyone's sharing it, then everyone's the same. Everyone's having a chat with the same food, and that's the environment that sparks a lot of humility and love.
I read a quote the other day about Jesus being a carpenter's son. Like of course we know he's God's son, but he was also Joseph's son. Like he was parented by Joseph as well, who was a carpenter. And the quote was about Jesus was good at making tables. And really, like, obviously that's not just physical tables, like when we think about carpentry, but actually spiritual tables. And like every week when we remember him, and there's a table like Psalm 23, the Lord's my shepherd, I shall not want. This table, the table you have furnished for me. And yeah, I think Jesus is a maker of tables. He brings us together in these moments. And yes, you don't even need physical tables there at time. God's greater than physical furniture. And of course, like we're the furniture. We're being built into this amazing temple. That really struck me. It struck me that like about Jesus being this maker of tables.
I love that.
What tables mean. Because we actually don't hear about him cooking. It's like, well, there's all these food moments, but when did Jesus do cooking, prepare food? And we don't hear about that.
But it's amazing to think about. It's a very tangible thing, and that's what I love about that. Jesus as a maker of tables. Like just even thinking about that as a fact is just great. Like it's so helpful for relatability and a feeling of knowing someone a bit more. It's like there's a story to everyone's choices and everyone's lives, and food's a great place to start when you want to unpack someone's story. And that story could be their day. I'm not talking epic. Everyone has to have like some kind of meaningful, like well-written past and future and everything. You just hear about someone's week, someone's bad experiences, someone's good experiences, someone's hopes, someone's dreams. They're all stories that are real a lot of the time, or hypothetical. And food is where you're going to get really honest, really fun stories a lot of the time.
Yeah, and it's kind of what it means to be human. Like when we share all our day, our week, our year, like whether it's been good or bad or in between. And with that sharing, it's just about being human and kind of recognizing that we're not alone. You hear someone's story and you're like, I'm with you. I get that. That resonates with me. I felt like that too. And if you can share that with the person telling you, then they don't feel alone. Neither do you. Like that's where that togetherness and connection happens.
And it's a great reason to try and push yourself a little bit, even if you're not someone who likes pushing themselves. And it's just you're very afraid of things not working out right. And I'm definitely someone like that. Maybe not in cooking, but in a lot of other areas. And it can be a barrier. And it can be a barrier to connection, to storytelling. There's a lot of reasons why I like sharing the can-do approach and sharing the what's like the amazing fulfilling feeling you can get from just saying, oh, maybe I can do that, and then maybe I can learn something that will help me achieve something else by extension. So if you do feel lonely and you're like, no one invites me anywhere, our friends don't get us over, we're always doing this, or then instead of thinking about how other people aren't doing things or how other people could be doing things, like I really believe that we should be a bit more self-empowered and a bit more intentional, and I catch myself out doing the opposite of this all the time, and then flipping it on myself and go, okay, I really want that. Well, if I cook and clean, maybe someone will come to me and I can be the person that I wish someone else was. Food's great because you can facilitate other people having a good time who might not want to try it, and then maybe they'll domino and they'll try it themselves or something.
Sometimes I just think there are no words for situations and people, like when someone is suffering, when they've lost a loved one, when they've learned that they're ill and it's something that's very life-threatening, when there's broken relationships, all sorts of these situations. Sometimes there really just aren't the right words to say to those people. We can hug them, we can cry with them, we can just sit there in the darkness like Job's friends did. But I always feel like we can always give food. Like food is always needed. People need to eat. And if you're not sure what to do, if you're not sure what to say, feed that person. It can be the most simplest meal. It can be left on the doorstep with no conversation, but that will make a difference. That will just make us, a small difference in that person's day.
And again, that comes back to the simplicity of the act, and the smallness of it is probably a bigger impact and it's more accessible to us as people who want to give more, for example, or don't think they give enough or want to benefit someone else, is taking away that thought that you have to have that right conversation. You have to have the answers. You have to have something that they will benefit from hugely and will change their entire mental state. Like, we just don't have the ability to do that. We don't have the power to give people answers. We don't have the knowledge. We don't have the answers. But we do have the ability to, like you say, give some food most of the time. And it's a small thing, but we all need it.
It's all throughout scripture, isn't it? Like spiritual food as well. Obviously not just the physical food, but all these verses about what is the spiritual food we need. I love that verse about that proverb, give me neither poverty nor riches, but just give me the food that is needful for me. Like, that's it, the simple things, the things of God that are pure and simple and real. And like, it could just be one verse that sustains you throughout your day. It could just be that moment of prayer that like sustains you. But that is sometimes all we need. Yeah.
And it's just having the presence of mind to think about those as being God moments. It's again emphasizing that working God into your everyday is prayer, I think. And that sort of thoughtful intentionality of God in all your choices, in your little moments, is, I think, more sustainable, more realistic, more fulfilling even.
Yeah, nourishing.
Yeah, that's a good way of putting it. Yeah, more nourishing. It sort of fills you up.
Yeah.
Seeing God and then choosing to be with God intentionally in those little moments. And
Yeah, I love that feeling of just being grateful. In those moments where you are being fed, where you're being fed physically, where you're being fed spiritually, and where you haven't had to do it for yourself. Like, I mean, I love cooking, but I have such pleasure in someone cooking for me too.
Yes.
And sometimes people don't want to cook for me because they're a bit intimidated, and I'm like, no, yes. You can just put a plate in front of me and I will be happy, just because someone has taken that time and energy and love just to, whether it's quick or a long time, and they put that plate in front of you and they come and sit at that table with you and they enjoy it with you.
That's the exciting thing.
We give, but we have to receive too. And I think actually, we've been talking a lot about giving in this conversation, but being a good receiver, that is the relationship too. We're receiving from God. We're not just giving to God. We receive a lot from him, of course. Like, he showers blessings upon us. But we have to be good receivers in our human relationships with each other as well. Because that's a way of showing love, just by receiving, accepting.
Yeah. You were saying other people might be intimidated because you're actually a bit of a home cook as well. And you do put a lot of effort in, and you practice and you learn and you try, and people are like, but you don't care when someone else is cooking for you. You're just so appreciative of it. But how often do we judge what other people are going to think of us based on what we think they think we're going to do to them? It's like this hypothetical world exists in everyone's head. So in our head, we're like, if someone just made me anything, I'd be so grateful for it. But everyone else isn't like that. I have to get it perfect because otherwise they won't appreciate it. And we're so flawed in our logic and our approach. More and more, I've been trusting that most of the time how I feel about a situation is probably how someone else feels about a situation. And if I feel that someone making me anything for my dinner instead of me having to make it would be amazing, in my head, I'm going to love it. I'll be so grateful they didn't have to do it. So if I apply how I would react to someone else doing it to them reacting to my food, then I just sort of trust that is how most people will react, unless they, really don't like asparagus or something. But coriander, divisive.
Very divisive.
Yeah.
And I feel like that comes from a place of the giving and receiving and treating people as, love thy neighbour as thyself. It comes from a place of humility and thankfulness, I think. Grateful for what they're giving you, and being grateful in the giving, anything you give to them as well. Yeah, and if we become too picky in particular and get a reputation for being picky in particular, that creates barriers, doesn't it? Like, people, as I say, I use the word intimidated. Like, people don't want to give because they're worried that you're going to be like, you're going to criticize, or you're going to pull apart what they've made. If we move it on from food to spiritual things and things we do with each other in our ecclesias as well, they are our offerings, different things that people do for each other, all the gifts that they bring when we come together, they're our offerings. And if they're intimidated by offering their gift, whatever that may be, they'll end up just coming in fear, or even not giving and going, what, I don't want to do that because someone's going to pick on me and someone's going to pull that apart, and because it's not perfect. But going back to what you were saying before is God doesn't want perfect. God just he'll take that loaf of bread, however you've made it, as long as you've made that in love, as long as that bread is being made in a process of love and intentionality. That's what he cares about. Yeah. And that's what we need to care about when we receive from other people. Yeah.
Well, that's how we serve God, is serving each other. And I think that's so powerful. The more you think about it, everything you do for or with other people is for or with God. The simplicity of it is just amazing.